Moving to Epsilon Prime was supposed to be a fresh start. After everything I'd been through, the years in the military, the divorce, the long nights wondering where it all went wrong, I just wanted peace. A simple life, a place to breathe. I didn't need adventure, didn't need excitement. I just needed a quiet corner of the universe where I could exist without everything feeling like a battle. Epsilon Prime was perfect for that. The colony wasn't too crowded, but it wasn't isolated either. There were enough humans around to make it feel familiar, enough alien species to remind me that Earth wasn't the center of the universe anymore. The air was crisp, the gravity only slightly lighter than what I was used to, and the days were long, stretching into violet-hued sunsets that made even the worst of my memories feel distant. I found a small house on the outskirts of the colony. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that barely functioned, and a living room that looked like it had seen better decades, but it was mine. The view overlooked the amber plains that stretched toward the mountains in the distance, a landscape so alien yet strangely comforting. It was quiet, it was safe. For the first few weeks I settled into a routine. Wake up early, drink too much coffee, try to keep busy with odd jobs around the colony. I wasn't retired, not really, but I wasn't exactly working either. I picked up whatever jobs I could, fixing equipment, moving cargo, even consulting. For security now and then, when some of the colony administrators got paranoid. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept my mind from wandering to places I didn't want it to go. The only problem? I wasn't exactly great at taking care of myself. It wasn't that I was incapable. I'd survived worse conditions in the military after all, but the motivation to keep my home in order just wasn't there. Dishes piled up, clothes were strewn across furniture. I'd tell myself I'd fix the leaky sink tomorrow, but tomorrow kept getting pushed back. Before long I realized I needed help. That's how I found Karel. The colony had a job board, both physical and digital, where you could hire workers for just about anything. Mechanics, technicians, transport pilots, even personal assistants. Housekeeping wasn't something I ever thought I'd need, but the more I looked around my house, the more I realized it wouldn't hurt to have someone come in and keep things from turning into a complete disaster. The listing for Karel caught my attention immediately. No fluff, no unnecessary words, just a name, a species, and a brief description of services. Karel, Tivani, housekeeping, meal preparation, home maintenance, efficient, discreet. I didn't know much about the Tivani, but I had seen a few around the colony. They were tall, agile, their skin ranging from deep blue to a metallic silver, and their golden eyes had a way of making you feel like they could see right through you. I'd heard they were disciplined, almost militaristic in their approach. To work, no nonsense, no wasted time, that was exactly what I needed. I sent a request, expecting to wait a few days for a response. Instead, I got an answer within the hour, a simple message. Accepted. I will arrive at sunrise. She was punctual. The next morning, just as the first rays of Epsilon Prime's sun stretched over the horizon, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, Karel stood there, a small satchel slung over her shoulder, her golden eyes scanning me from head to toe. "You require assistance," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, blunt and to the point. I nodded. "Yeah. Come in." She stepped inside, taking in the mess with a quick glance. Most people would have judged me for it, maybe made a joke, but Karel didn't say anything. She simply walked past me, set her satchel down, and got to work. I watched as she moved through the house, assessing, cataloging, planning. She was efficient, just like her message had promised. Within minutes, she had already started clearing. The mess, gathering dishes, straightening furniture. Her movements were precise, almost calculated, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. "You live alone," she observed. "Yeah. You do not cook." I scratched the back of my neck. "Not really." "You do not clean," I sighed. "That obvious, huh?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to face me, tilting her head slightly. "What do you eat?" Whatever's easy." Her eyes narrowed slightly, and for the first time, I thought I saw something close to disapproval. Without another word, she pulled out a small device from her satchel and tapped at it, scanning my kitchen, my supplies, my fridge, which admittedly wasn't well stocked. "I will improve your diet," she said simply. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. I had hired her to clean, not manage my life. But the way she spoke, the certainty in her voice, it was hard to argue. She worked quickly, methodically, not wasting a single movement. By midday, my home looked better than it had in weeks. It wasn't just clean, it was organized. Every item had its place. Every surface was spotless. It was efficient, just like her. But even as she worked, I noticed something odd. She never asked unnecessary questions, never engaged in small talk. She watched me, studying my habits, my movements, my routines. It wasn't intrusive exactly, but it was deliberate. I had hired a housekeeper, but something about Carol told me she was much more than that. Carol was excellent at her job. Too good, honestly. I had expected her to come in, clean up, and maybe cook a few meals. Instead, she operated with a level of efficiency that felt almost military. Within the first day, my home was transformed. Every surface gleamed. Every item had been placed with purpose. The clutter I had grown used to, the random tools left on the table, the boots kicked off in the corner, was gone. Not just cleaned, but organized. At first, I appreciated it. I liked having a clean home. I liked waking up to the smell of fresh coffee and finding my clothes neatly folded, my kitchen fully stocked with food I didn't remember buying. It was easy to let her take control of the little things, to let her manage the household, while I focused on my work. But then, little by little, I started noticing things. She never made a sound when she moved. Even when I knew she was in the same room as me, I'd glance away for a second and then find her standing somewhere else, perfectly still, watching. Not in a creepy way exactly, more like she was studying me, evaluating. At first I thought I was imagining it. I told myself that she was just efficient, that maybe the Tivani had different cultural norms when it came to personal space. But then there were the times I caught her watching me eat, her golden eyes flicking between my hands and my mouth as if she were analyzing my chewing patterns. I tried to ignore it. After all, she was doing her job, and she was doing it well. But then there was the night I woke up to find her standing in the doorway of my bedroom. I had been in a deep sleep. But something had pulled me awake, some instinct honed from my years in the military, that gut feeling that someone was near. When I opened my eyes, she was there, motionless, her eyes reflecting the dim light from the hallway. "What the hell?" I groaned, rubbing my face. "Carell, what are you doing?" She didn't flinch. "You were restless." I blinked at her. "What? You do not sleep well." I sat up, my head still foggy. "That's none of your business." She tilted her head as if considering my words. "It is, if it affects your health." I sighed. I wasn't in the mood to argue, but something about the way she stood there, watching, unsettled me. "Just don't stand in my doorway like that, all right?" She hesitated, then gave a small nod and turned away, disappearing down the hall with barely a whisper of movement. I told myself she was just being thorough. Maybe she took her job too seriously. Maybe her people had some kind of hyper-vigilant sense of responsibility. But it didn't stop there. A few days later, I noticed her adjusting my meals. At first, it was subtle. She'd replace my usual protein bars with something freshly prepared, swap out my coffee for some kind of herbal drink I didn't recognize. When I asked her about it, she simply said, "Your previous choices were insufficient." I frowned. "Insufficient for what?" "For your well-being." I didn't argue, mostly because the food was good, and I did feel better. But then I saw Slipped something into my drink before dinner one evening. I had walked into the kitchen, fully intending to grab a drink and head to the couch. But I froze when I saw her carefully tilting a small vial into my water. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She didn't startle. She simply looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Nutritional supplement. You do not take care of yourself." I frowned. "You can't just put things in my drink without telling me. You require it." "That's not the point, Karel." She regarded me for a long moment before setting the vial down. "I will inform you next time." There was something about the way she said it that made me uneasy. Not apologetic, not defensive, just matter of fact, as if she had already decided that my care was her responsibility. I should have been more firm, should have pushed back harder, but I didn't. Maybe it was because I was tired. Maybe it was because a small part of me liked that someone was paying attention, that someone cared enough to notice the things I ignored about myself. Or maybe it was because I didn't want to admit that I was starting to feel watched, not in an overtly threatening way, not in a way that made me think she wanted to hurt me, but in a way that made me realize something was off. I started paying more attention. I started watching her, and the more I watched, the more I realized something. Karel wasn't just cleaning my house. She was studying me. I woke up feeling groggy, like I had been drugged. My limbs felt heavy, my head thick with fog. The air smelled different, sharp, metallic, almost sterile. It wasn't the usual scent of my bedroom, and that set off every alarm in my mind. My instincts screamed at me to move, to get up, to fight, but I couldn't. Something was holding me down. Panic surged through my body as I struggled to lift my arms, but they wouldn't budge. A weight pressed against my chest, firm and unmoving. My breathing came faster, my pulse hammering as I forced my eyes open. Karel was on top of me. Her golden eyes were inches from my face, staring at me with that same unreadable intensity I had come to associate with her. One of her hands was pressed against my shoulder, pinning me down with more strength than I thought she had. Her other hand was braced against my ribs, as if she were shielding me from something. My mind raced. Had I been attacked? Was this some kind of betrayal? I opened my mouth to speak, to demand an explanation, but she silenced me with a sharp whisper, "Stay still." I didn't listen. I bucked against her grip, trying to throw her off, but she tightened her hold, her tail wrapping around my wrist like a coiled rope. "Karel, what the hell are you doing?" I hissed, my voice rough from sleep. She didn't answer immediately. Her ears flicked as if she were listening for something, her body tense and coiled like a predator ready to strike. That was when I noticed the room wasn't completely dark. A dim glow flickered from the hallway outside my bedroom, casting long shadows along the floor, and then I saw it. A figure lay sprawled on the ground near my door, half shrouded in darkness. Humanoid, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its fingers ending in razor-sharp claws that gleamed under the faint light. The creature's chest rose and fell in slow, shallow breaths. It wasn't dead, just unconscious. I stopped struggling. "What is that?" I whispered. Karel finally released my wrist, but she didn't move off of me. Instead, she turned her head slightly, her golden eyes never leaving the figure on the floor. "An assassin," she murmured. "Sent to kill you." The words were so calm, so casual, that they took a moment to register. I blinked. "What?" She finally moved, slowly shifting her weight off my chest, but remaining close, as if expecting another attack. He broke in. "While you were sleeping," she said, "I neutralized him before he could harm you." My mind reeled. An assassin? Here? On Epsilon Prime? That didn't make sense. I wasn't important enough for something like this. I wasn't some government official or high-ranking military officer. I was just a guy trying to live a quiet life, and yet there was a very real, very dangerous-looking creature unconscious in my bedroom. I sat up, rubbing my temples, still struggling to fully wake up. "You're telling me someone sent a damn Hitman after me? That's insane. Carell exhaled slowly, shifting into a crouch beside the unmoving body. Not insane. Expected. I stared at her. Expected? What the hell does that mean? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out, gripping the creature's arm and flipping it onto its back. The movement was effortless, her strength surprising. Now that I could see the thing's face, I realized it wasn't just some common thief. Its skin was a deep, sickly gray, its mouth lined with needle-like teeth, and its eyes, black and empty, seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect. I'd never seen anything like it before. Why would someone send this thing after me? I asked, my voice tight. Carell finally turned to face me fully, her golden eyes unreadable. Because you are human. I frowned. That's not an answer. She studied me for a moment before speaking again, her voice softer this time. Because you are more important than you realize. The words sent a chill down my spine. I had hired Carell to clean my house, to cook my meals, to keep things in order. But now, as I sat there staring at the unconscious assassin on my bedroom floor, I realized something else. Carell hadn't just been watching me all this time. She had been protecting me, and whatever she knew, whatever she wasn't telling me, was something that had just nearly gotten me killed. I sat on the edge of my bed, my heart still pounding as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. An assassin had broken into my home. Carell had taken him down before I even knew he was there, and now she was acting like this was all expected, like this wasn't some freak occurrence but something inevitable. I ran a hand through my hair, forcing my breathing to slow. You need to start explaining now. Carell didn't respond right away. She was crouched beside the unconscious figure, her sharp fingers pressed against its throat, checking for a pulse. Her expression remained unreadable, but I could see the slight tension in her shoulders. She hadn't been expecting this either. Not exactly. Carell, I said again, firmer this time. She looked up at me, her golden eyes catching the dim light. Then finally she spoke. You are not safe here. I let out a humorless laugh. No kidding, I just woke up to an assassin in my house. She shook her head. You do not understand. This is only the beginning. My stomach twisted. There was something in her tone, something final. I stood up, still feeling unsteady. All right, then tell me what's going on. Why the hell would someone want me dead? Carell exhaled, then stood in one fluid motion. Because you are human. I frowned. That's not a reason. There are plenty of humans on Epsilon Prime. Yes, and many of them are watched, monitored, controlled. The way she said it made my skin prickle. Controlled by who? She was silent for a long moment, as if weighing how much to tell me. Then, finally, by those who believe humanity should never have left its homeworld. The words sent a cold chill through me. I had heard the conspiracy theories before, whispers in dark corners, drunken ramblings in colony bars. There were always rumors about secret factions, about groups that believed humans had no place in the wider galaxy, that we were a threat, a species too dangerous to be left unchecked. But that was all it had ever been to me, rumors. You're telling me this is real? I asked, my voice quieter than before. Carell nodded. Very real. I swallowed hard. And what do they want with me? She tilted her head slightly. You are not just any human. I blinked. What the hell does that mean? Carell hesitated, then gestured toward the unconscious assassin on the floor. Do you recognize this species? I looked down at the creature. Its gray skin, its two long limbs, the needle-like teeth barely visible behind its slack jaw. I shook my head. Never seen anything like it. Carell's gaze darkened. That is because they are not supposed to exist. I exhaled sharply, frustration starting to bubble beneath my fear. Carell, stop being cryptic and just tell me what's going on. She studied me for a long moment before finally speaking. This assassin is a Kazir, a species wiped out over a century ago. Or so the records claim. My breath caught. You're saying they faked their extinction? Carell nodded. Or they were hidden, used. Used. The word made my skin crawl. Used by who? I looked back down at the unconscious assassin. Whoever had sent him clearly had resources. Power. If Carell hadn't been here, if she hadn't been watching me, I wouldn't be standing here right now. I turned back to her. You knew this was coming. She didn't deny it. I suspected. I let out a slow, shaky breath. Why didn't you tell me? Carell's eyes softened slightly. Because you would not have believed me. I hated that she was right. Even now, standing over the proof, some part of me still didn't want to believe this was real, that I had been living my life, going through my routine, while something like this was lurking just beneath the surface. I shook my head. Okay, fine, but that still doesn't explain why me. Carell hesitated again. Then, to my surprise, she took a slow step closer. Because, she said quietly, you carry something important, something they fear. I stared at her, my pulse quickening. What? Carell reached into her satchel, pulling out a small data chip. She held it up between two fingers, the tiny device catching the dim light. This. I blinked. That's not mine. No, she agreed. It is not. But it was placed in your home. Hidden. My mouth went dry. By who? Her expression darkened. By someone who wanted you to be the target. The weight of her words settled on my chest like a boulder. This wasn't random. This wasn't bad luck. Someone had set me up. The reality of my situation hit me like a freight train. Someone had deliberately made me a target. Someone had hidden that data chip in my home, ensuring that I would be the one to take the fall. And now an assassin, an extinct species no less, had been sent to kill me because of it. I swallowed hard, my hands curling into fists. Who? My voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. Who set me up? Carell studied me for a moment, her golden eyes unreadable. Then she handed me the data chip. I hesitated before taking it, the small object feeling unnaturally heavy in my palm. What's on it? She exhaled slowly. I do not know yet, but if the Khazir were sent after you, it must be something dangerous. I clenched my jaw. Then we need to find out. Carell nodded. Agreed. I moved toward my desk, my heart still racing as I powered up my terminal. My fingers hovered over the input port for a second, doubt creeping into my mind. What if this was a trap? What if accessing the data only made things worse? Then I glanced at the unconscious assassin on my floor and realized things couldn't get much worse. I inserted the chip. The screen flickered for a moment before a stream of encrypted data filled the display. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just some random piece of information. This was classified, military-grade encryption, the kind used by the highest levels of government. This is serious, I muttered. Carell leaned in, her expression tense. Can you break the encryption? I shook my head. Not on my own. I'd need access to a decryption program, something powerful. And that means... I trailed off, already knowing what needed to be done. Carell nodded as if reading my thoughts. We need to leave. I let out a slow breath, rubbing my temple. My quiet, peaceful life had just been shattered in the span of a few hours. My home wasn't safe. I wasn't safe. And I had no idea who I could trust. Still, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for the next assassin to show up. I stood up. We need to get to the capital. I know someone who can crack this. Carell's ears twitched. Can they be trusted? I hesitated. Mostly. Her tail flicked in disapproval, but she didn't argue. Then we moved quickly. I nodded and turned back toward my room to grab a bag, then stopped, my eyes falling on the unconscious assassin again. What do we do about him? Karel glanced down at the Kazir, then reached into her belt and pulled out a small, sleek-looking device. She pressed it against the assassin's neck, and a quiet hum filled the room. A second later, the creature convulsed once before going. Completely still, I sucked in a sharp breath. "Did you just—" "Non-lethal neural disruption," she said flatly. "He will remain unconscious for several hours. By the time he wakes, we will be long gone." I released the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "You could have warned me." She simply tilted her head. Would it have changed anything? I had no answer for that. I turned away, shoving what few essentials I needed into a bag. A few changes of clothes, my ID, a concealed weapon, not that I had much faith in a basic sidearm if we ran into more Kazir. 5 minutes later, I was ready. Karel was already at the door, moving with that same silent efficiency I had come to recognize. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me, carrying with it the distant hum of the city. The street was quiet, too quiet. My instincts prickled. Again, that deep-rooted sense of being watched, making the hairs on my neck stand up. Karel moved ahead of me, scanning the area with sharp eyes. "Stay close." I didn't need to be told twice. We slipped into the shadows, moving quickly and carefully. I had no idea what was on that data chip, but I was beginning to understand one thing. Whoever had set me up had underestimated me, and they had definitely underestimated Karel. The city felt different now. It wasn't the same familiar place I had lived in for years. Every shadow felt deeper, every sound sharper. The streets, usually just background noise in my day-to-day life, now pulsed with unseen dangers. I wasn't just another citizen going about my business anymore. I was a target. Karel moved with practiced ease, her steps silent, her body low as she scanned every alley, every rooftop, every passing vehicle. I did my best to keep up. My nerves wound. So tight I thought they might snap. We needed to get to the capital. We needed answers. The problem? The capital was on the other side of the city, and we couldn't risk taking the main transport hubs. If they had found me once, they could find me again. "We need a vehicle," I whispered. Karel nodded but didn't slow down. "Not a public one. We will need to acquire one discreetly." I glanced at her. "You mean steal one?" She didn't answer. I exhaled. Great. Just great. My mind raced through options. I wasn't a criminal. I didn't steal things. But I also wasn't about to sit around waiting for another Kazir to finish the job. Karel led us down a side street where the glow of the main roads barely reached. The air smelled like damp metal and old wiring. A mechanic's shop stood at the end of the alley, its entrance dark, its doors locked for the night. But just outside, sitting unattended in a dimly lit lot, were several older model speeders. Karel crouched beside one, running her fingers along the panel near the ignition. "This one. Simple controls. Easy to override." I looked around. The street was empty, but it wouldn't stay that way forever. "Can you hotwire it?" She didn't answer, just produced a small tool from her belt and got to work. A few tense seconds passed before the speeder let out a quiet click, its dashboard lighting up. "Get in." I didn't argue. Karel slid into the driver's seat, while I hopped in beside her. She took off smoothly, maneuvering the vehicle into the main flow of traffic like she had done this 1,000 times before. "Where did you learn to do that?" I asked, still gripping the side of my seat. She didn't look at me. "I was trained for many things." "Right." Of course she was. I let out a slow breath, trying to ease the tension in my shoulders. The speeder blended in well enough. Its outdated design making it unremarkable among the thousands of other vehicles moving through the city. But I still felt it. That creeping sensation of being watched. Karel must have felt it too, because her grip on the controls tightened. They will be looking for us. I glanced at her. You think they already know we're gone? Her ears twitched. They knew the moment the assassin failed. The thought made my stomach twist. How many more would they send? I looked at the navigation panel. There's a back route through the industrial district. It'll take longer, but we'll be off the main scanners. Carell considered that for a second, then adjusted course. Good. The industrial district was a maze of towering storage facilities, abandoned warehouses, and rusted machinery left to decay. It wasn't the kind of place you wanted to be at night, especially not while on the run. We weaved through darkened streets, our speeder's lights barely cutting through the gloom. Then, ahead of us, I saw them. Two figures standing in the middle of the road. They weren't just civilians. Even from a distance, I could see the glint of weapons in their hands, the way their posture screamed predators waiting for prey. Carell slowed the speeder. They are blocking our path. I swallowed hard. You think they know it's us? She didn't answer right away, her gaze flicking toward the side alleys, the rooftops above. They are waiting for confirmation. A chill ran down my spine. Meaning what? Carell's tail flicked once. Meaning if we stop, we die. She gunned the engine. The speeder lurched forward, tires screeching against the pavement. The two figures reacted instantly, raising their weapons. A shot rang out, searing through the air, just inches from the vehicle. Carell twisted the controls sharply, swerving to the side as more shots followed, bright streaks of plasma lighting up the dark. I ducked, my pulse hammering. We need a plan now. Carell didn't hesitate. Hold on! She jerked the speeder sideways, sending it into a tight turn down a narrow alley. The vehicle barely fit, scraping against the metal walls as sparks flew. Our pursuers didn't hesitate. The roar of engines filled the air as another speeder followed us in. I looked back and saw them gaining. A second later, a shot tore through the side panel, filling the cabin with smoke. We're not going to make it, I shouted. Carell's jaw tightened. Yes, we will. And then she did something insane. She flipped a switch on the console, and suddenly the speeder lurched, its engine roaring to full power. We shot forward like a missile, the sudden burst of speed sending my stomach into my throat. The alley ended in a sharp drop, an old maintenance ramp leading straight down into the underground tunnels. Carell didn't slow down. We're going. Down there, I yelled. She met my eyes, calm as ever. Trust me. I had no choice. The speeder hit the edge of the ramp, and we plunged into the darkness below. For a few terrifying seconds, we were weightless. The speeder dropped into the darkness below, the tunnel swallowing us whole. My stomach lurched, my fingers digging into the seat, as Carell wrestled with the controls. Then the thrusters roared back to life, and the speeder's descent turned into a barely controlled glide. Sparks flew as we skimmed the tunnel walls, metal screeching against metal. I clenched my teeth, waiting for the inevitable crash, but Carell held firm. The speeder hit the tunnel floor with a jarring thud, bounced once, and then stabilized. I exhaled sharply. You are insane! Carell didn't respond. She was already scanning the displays, adjusting our speed as the speeder roared forward through the underground passageway. The tunnels were ancient, remnants of an old infrastructure project that had long been abandoned. Dim emergency lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows across the cracked walls. I looked back. No sign of our pursuers. They didn't follow us. Carell's ears twitched. Not immediately. They were not prepared for the drop. I let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, well, neither was I. She didn't smile. They will recover, and they will find another way down. My amusement vanished. So we're not safe yet. No. I turned to the navigation display. The tunnels stretched for miles beneath the city, a forgotten labyrinth of old maintenance roads and transport pathways. If we could stay ahead of them, we might just have a shot at getting out undetected, but I could already hear it, a distant hum. Engines! They found another way, I muttered. Carell didn't hesitate. She pushed the speeder faster the controls, responding sluggishly from the damage we'd taken. The walls blurred past, the tunnel narrowing in places, forcing her to make sharp, split-second maneuvers. The sound behind us grew louder. I glanced at the rear display, and my stomach dropped. 3 speeders, gaining fast. They're coming in hot, I warned. Carell's grip tightened. We will not outrun them for long. I looked around, desperate for options. The tunnel had multiple branching paths, but most were too narrow for a vehicle at this speed. If we slowed down, they'd be on us in seconds. And then I saw it, an old access gate, partially open, a pedestrian path, barely wide enough for our speeder, if we were lucky. There, I pointed. Take that tunnel. Carell didn't hesitate. At the last possible second, she wrenched the controls sideways. The speeder tilted dangerously, metal scraping as we slipped through the narrow gap. The moment we cleared the entrance, she cut the thrusters. The speeder lurched, slowing just enough to avoid slamming into the walls. We shot forward into the darkness, but this time without the roar of our engine echoing around us. I held my breath. Seconds later, the sound of our pursuers thundered past the entrance. They hadn't seen us turn. We sat in silence, listening as the noise faded into the distance. Then, finally, Carell exhaled. We lost them, I whispered. For now, she corrected. I let my head rest against the seat, exhaustion setting in. My hands were still trembling, my heart still hammering, but we were alive. Carell tapped at the display, bringing up a map of the tunnels. This path leads out near the city perimeter. If we take it, we can reach the outer roads undetected. I nodded, still catching my breath. And then we reach the capital. She met my eyes, her expression unreadable, and we find out who wants you dead.